Take out your worksheet, the periodic table at a glance. Look at the front side of the worksheet that has instructions. They list part 1, part 2, part 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. If you notice, it says for part 1, use a colored pencil to shade in the areas of the periodic table which contain elements that are metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. If you look in the very back of your physical science textbook, you'll see a periodic table, and these metals, nonmetals, and metalloids are colored in for you. If you notice, going down your periodic table, there is a division between the metals and the nonmetals. The metals are on the left and the nonmetals are on the right. In the periodic table that I'm showing to you now, I've drawn a big black line to show you where that division is. The metalloids fall along that line. So I'm coloring the metalloids in with green. You can choose whatever color you like, but on the right side of that line and on the right side of the metalloids are the nonmetals. So I'm coloring those in with yellow. We also include hydrogen as a nonmetal, even though it's way over there on the left-hand side. So notice on the left-hand column at the top, there is also a nonmetal. The metals are all the rest of the elements which fill the left-hand side and lower down. Choose a color, color in the metals, the nonmetals, and the metalloids on your periodic table. On the front side of your worksheet where it gives the instructions, you should also look in your book to list the properties of the metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. You may need to look in the text and not just in the glossary in order to identify what are the characteristics of metals, nonmetals, and metalloids. Metalloids, the ones I've colored in green, really are just elements that have properties of both metals and nonmetals, and they fall somewhere in between. Part 2 of the instructions asks you to identify the two elements. First, a metalloid, or it's in a metalloid position, but it's classified as a metal. So which of the elements would you expect to be a metalloid, but in fact it seems to be colored as a metal? Identify the name of that element and write it on your worksheet. And then also identify the name of the element that's in a metal position but is not a metal. So one that you're surprised happens to be a metal based on where it is. Part 3 asks you to number each group. So the groups are run across the top. So those are the ones that I'm listing in red here. Then I'd like you to label the groups with their appropriate names. So those fall into the cylinders: alkali metals, alkaline earth metals, transition metals, boron group, carbon group, nitrogen group, oxygen group, halogen, and noble gases. That always looks like a ton to memorize, but if you notice way over on the right, the noble gases, you've probably heard of those before. And next to those, the halogens, you may have heard of the halogens before as well. The next 4 going over from the right towards the left, the oxygen, the nitrogen, the carbon, and the boron group, those are just named based on the first element in that group. Then as we left, the transition metals. Transition metals, don't get those confused with metalloids. The transition metals are in the middle, transition. So then it falls to memorizing alkaline earth metals and alkali metals. The next thing your instructions ask you to do is to label each period with its and periods are going down the left-hand side. They are naming the rows of the periodic table. So as you go across, the first row is 1, the second row is 2. Rows are otherwise named as periods. And then part 6 asks you to label at the bottom of the column the number of valence electrons found in the group of elements. So we talked about those, but those numbers go at the bottom of the periodic table. 1 and 2, skip the transition metals, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Those become super critical when we start talking about bonding. So don't lose sight of those, even though they might not yet make sense. And if you need to go back and review any of the things we've done as you do your coloring and your completion, do that now.